And we are live. Hello and welcome everybody to our Workflow Wednesday with the big boss, Jon Bach. So we're trying out Restream. I'm hoping that the chat all comes together in one big flow. So far I haven't seen anything, but that's okay. We're only just like 2 or 3 minutes into this. I think we're good though. So welcome, Jon. Thank you for taking time out of your day to join us to talk about
Absolutely.
programming for this one, which will be really fun.
Yeah.
Something something completely different because it's I feel like that's a side of things that people either don't consider very often and really don't get to see or even hear about. So yeah, just kind of, I guess, the standard introduction, who you are, what you do, in the context of your programming part.
Yeah, sure. Okay. Well, I mean, just first of all, to everyone who's already joined in, welcome. This is like Houston said, this is all new to us, going back to live on like a bunch of platforms at the same time. So that's a lot of new faces and people for us, people we haven't connected with in quite a while. Um, so welcome. And what we're doing here is we're talking about work that is actually happening out in the world with technology. And a lot of times we'll have on, guests and people that we know out there in the field. And sometimes we'll talk here internally about either hardware, software, or work that we're doing. So I'm Jon Bach, founder and president of Puget Systems. And the reason why Houston's roped me in here today is that I do a lot of the programming work for our company internally. And that's something that I've been doing about 20 years now. I would love to not consider myself an expert in it. However, I'm being told that I'm an expert in it. And so what we'll talk about today is really what that means. Like, what do we do? What kind of challenges do we have? What do we have to work through? And really, with any small business or any technology-based business, there's a lot that has to go on behind the scenes to kind of make all the gears turn.
No
And
doubt.
as I've seen a bunch of other small businesses in my years, it's amazing how many run on like Excel spreadsheets and Notepad. And we like to think that we can do a little bit better than that, and that's a lot of the work that I do day to day.
Cool. Wow, man, that's yeah. Um, I admit I'm going to be perfectly and brutally honest here. I spaced out a little bit because I was looking at the chat,
Sure, sure.
but
Yeah, there's a lot going on. I'm seeing it too.
yeah, which is really exciting. So I'm glad that it looks like people are from all the different channels are in there and chatting and everything. So everything is working out really well, and I'm super stoked for this. So
And definitely let us know in the chat if you're having any issues. Like we said, this
yeah,
is new to us. And so if there's anything we can improve on, like let us have it. So
yeah,
we
but
want that
yeah,
feedback so that we can work on it.
yeah, that's yeah. Please do. So I guess to start, just what kind of programming is it that you do? I know a little bit because I hear I'm inside the fence already, but like give a little bit of an example of just what it is that makes everything work.
Yeah. Well, I'm probably not your normal programmer, and I'm probably I know I feel like I need to add all these asterisks, like don't listen to anything I'm saying. But I'm a programmer who's been from 20 years of just having to do it and having to learn on the street and figure things out. And so boy, 20 years ago I started on Cold Fusion, and that was
Okay.
all the rage. And I moved to this cheaper thing called PHP.
Oh,
So our entire like web-based backend is all built on PHP.
cool.
So that's mostly what I'm programming in, because a lot of our administrative interfaces, I'd say that like what you see on our public website is, I don't know, 1/30th of our code.
Wow.
Almost everything that I work on is behind the scenes in our administrative interfaces, where we've built up from the ground up like a whole ERP system, an entire quoting system, a
What
ticketing system,
what's ERP?
ERP. What does it even mean? Enterprise resource planning. I don't even know. It's for purchasing, inventory, sales
Oh, okay.
quoting, um, yeah, all that type of stuff.
Okay.
And so we've built up a actually really extensive system. You've seen it, Houston, for everything. Like when we build our computers, the checkpoint process. So enterprise resource protocol. I was way off.
Okay, close. You had 2 out of 3, right?
But the whole process that we go through to make sure that we're delivering the product according to spec and keeping track of where everything is, like that's all built in-house, and that's all built on PHP with the SQL backend. We use MySQL. So I have to know kind of a little bit about everything when it comes to that stuff. So I write all of our SQL queries, output it in HTML. So you have to know HTML, you have to know CSS. We use the jQuery framework for
Ooh,
all of our JavaScript type work. And a few years back when mobile became like everything needed to be mobile, we moved to Twitter Bootstrap as our our wrapper or our foundation for everything. And that's based on jQuery as well.
right.
So anyhow, yeah, most of my stuff is web based, and I don't know really what else I program. I mean, everything else after that is just smaller stuff here and there, like scripting or security system APIs, that type of thing.
Yeah. Oh, neat. So that's cool. So we do have a question from the chat. What's easier, Cold Fusion or PHP?
I don't know. It was 20 years ago.
Oh. I suppose at the time.
Probably. Well, I mean, if you're started today, don't go Cold Fusion. I would say unless you want a real like niche career. I would say PHP because even back then PHP because it's just a bigger community base, and so when you are self-taught, your teacher is Google, and and you just need more people out there asking and answering questions to find that.
Right. I think any programmer out there would definitely say that like 50% of their code comes from Stack Overflow.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And it's always like the sixth answer on Stack Overflow because the first 5 don't work right.
Right. Yeah. A lot of copy and paste and then figuring out why does it work or not. So that's pretty cool. Okay. So 20 years, you've been doing it all by yourself. I know recently we brought on someone else, and so I want to say it was a little over a year now. So how did that go? First off, I guess what prompted that? Like, why did we need another person? And then how has that changed and affected what you do?
Yeah, well, I mean, so we've had programmers on staff a few times in the past, but it was probably before your time here, Houston. But we have had programmers here on staff, but they've always come on in a more like project based way. Like one time, we were programming benchmarking. In fact, that was the first programmer we had. His name was also John. This was in 2000.
There's so many Johns.
I know, there's too many Johns. This was like 2003 or something. And this was when we were building our benchmarking system. And so we brought in somebody like just for that. And then it was basically a contract. And then once that was up, then off he went. And so we've had a few people in here in the past like that. But this time we had Ryan join us about a year ago. And this was very different. I'll give you the real transparent answer. It was Wilson, who I've known for half my life and who has been at Puget Systems for 18 years, sat me down and looked me in the eye and said, "John, hire a programmer." And I said, all right. Because he saw, just how much it takes to, do development for I think we're 46 people company now. That's just a lot of development work when we're building all of our stuff in-house. I was spending, and I'm still spending, I don't know, probably on programming alone, still 40 hours a week just on that. And then there's all the other company stuff on top of that. So, he said, okay, time to bring in help. And so now it's a little bit different. Now it's not like we brought in somebody for project work. It's now we're bringing in somebody to like take the wheel and be more kind of the owner of all the efforts that we have going on. And having been programming this myself for 20 years, like that actually takes quite a large amount of time for me to hand off like 20 years of my crappy code off to a real programmer.
Sure.
And so, but what's been really beneficial to me has been, he came in and now for the first time we have a development team. Now it was only 2 of us, but it's still, there's all these kind of coordination efforts that you have to handle when you have a team that you don't have to do when you're by yourself. And that's a whole layer of complexity. But it's been really good for us because it's meant that like now instead of just Post-it notes all over the place, we actually have like a ticketing system and a organization system, and we do programming sprints where we organize how much we want to get done, and I can talk more about that later, I suppose. And with that structure, though, now we have the ability to bring other people in from around the company. And so we brought in other people around the company that definitely don't do this full time. But
Mm-hmm.
because we have the structure of being able to like assign out work, document what needs to be done, commit the code back, review the code, push the code up, like now that we can
That's
do all
cool.
that, we can actually get other help involved now. And so
Oh,
that's
that's
what
neat.
Ryan does. That he's first and foremost driving the structure of how we approach our development work.
Okay.
But then he also writes code as well. And as time progresses, the intention is that more and more of these things that I've been spending the last 20 years writing, like I'm not the owner anymore.
Mm-hmm.
I hand off to the development team over time, and so then I just kind of I drift off into the sunset, I think.
Aw. No, that sounds really cool though. So, what do you guys use to keep track of everything? Like, how does that
Yeah,
even work?
we looked at a few. And we're using Jira, and
Okay.
it's a really cool. And for small development teams, it's amazingly affordable.
And is
I
it
mean, just
that's a
10-20 dollars a
J?
month.
Okay.
Jira,
Okay.
Jira. It's by Atlassian, and we put up a portal where anyone in the company, we could open it up to customers in the future if we wanted to, can submit like requests, and then every week on Fridays we have what we call triage, where we look at all the tickets that come in and we try to say no to as many things as possible to protect our time for
Sure.
our big like year long planning kind of stuff. But yeah, no, we take in those requests and we bucket it all together into like, when are we going to do that? Is that going to fit in with a future project, or is that something we need to do right now? Who's going
Yeah.
to do it? And so we do that every Friday, and that's all still done in Jira. And then we run a 2 week sprint. And so this was all really fun to me as well. Like here, I've been programming for 20 years, and I didn't know what a sprint was. I'm embarrassed to say, but now that Ryan's here, he's educated me on all that. So the sprint basically is we say, okay, all these tasks that came in, how much time is each one going to take, or what is the difficulty level or the complexity level on each of those tickets. And I know that, okay, I can do 60 ticket points every 2 weeks, and you just kind of learn what that number is for yourself over time. And
Sure.
so we say, okay, for the upcoming weeks, this is the amount of stuff that I can fit in, and we all take our tickets, and then off we go.
That's neat.
Um, those tickets, man, okay, I could ramble forever on this, but
That's
those
okay.
tickets are organized into epics, and these epics are basically like real top level. If I'm like presenting at the company meeting in January, I'd say this year we're going to do X. We're going to make a
Okay.
benchmarking system. That would be an epic, and
So
the
like
benchmarking system.
EPOCH, like time span
No, no,
epic.
it's Epic,
Oh.
EPIC.
Oh,
Like this
okay.
is an epic amount of
Hmm.
work. Uh,
I get it.
I um,
Sure.
so yeah, so
Or like
we
a
fit those in. So we say,
yeah.
okay, to build a benchmarking system, we have like 3 phases of things we have to do. Each of those phases has maybe 30 different tickets we need to do,
Wow.
and those might have either 1 point up to 10 points or of difficulty. So anyway, all this organization, because it's actually really challenging, because my status quo, if I'm not intentional, my
Hmm.
status quo is always to do like whatever came up the most recently, or whatever I get done really quickly. And so
Sure.
I'm personally really good at like knocking out a bunch of little things. In fact, you'll see I post in our company Slack every couple Mondays, like,
Hmm.
here's the 30 things I just got done, and I love that. I actually get an immense amount of satisfaction from that. But if that's all I do, then we never make progress on our like yearly goals. Like, what did we
Oh,
actually want to do
sure.
this year? And so that's what the epics help us plan.
Okay. Wow. And then so I guess Ryan then is kind of in charge of that bigger, I guess keeping everybody on track for the big stuff.
Yeah, we haven't been, well, when we first started, that was a weak point for us as a dev team. Like, we would only do that once a year. So now we have once a month we do our epic review, and we have a Gantt chart that we plot out for the
Hmm.
entire year of like everything, when it's going to start, how long it's going to take, and we review that once a month to see if we're still on track. And basically,
Oh,
what that
cool.
has turned into is, how late are we on projects, and how much do we need to slide things, because everything goes longer than you think.
Of course. Yeah. I mean, I feel like I have very, very little programming experience from many years ago. And yeah, that seems to be the case I mean, with a lot of projects, really. I mean, construction to programming and stuff, you always kind of build in like an extra 20% buffer
Yeah.
just because things happen and like crazy, man. Yeah. Anything the gremlins always tend to
Well,
work their
and
way
this
into things.
and the sprint planning is supposed to address that, because you go in and you say like, okay, I can do 60 tickets. I can tell you, like, I love to take 60 tickets. I'm capable of executing about 40, but it sure hasn't stopped me from trying to take 60 tickets every 2 weeks.
Yeah,
And that's what it's supposed to tell you, is like, okay, now if you're going to be really honest with yourself, you can do 40 tickets every 2 weeks. And so you're supposed to like hone in over time. I think I'm just a little too much of an optimist for that to
sure.
work really well with me.
Well, that's cool. It does sound though that you're pretty self-aware of what you're capable of and stuff. Is just maybe actually meeting up with that. So
Yeah.
that's
Well,
yeah,
the other challenge in my position is like I'm not a full time dev,
right.
and so like this week, I just got, thank you, Neo and Edewall 97 for letting me know. Okay, we're having some video stuttering issues, but it's
I
only
think
when
it's just.
it's when I move my hands. So
I think yeah, I think it's. I mean, we're using Zoom for this, so there's going to be
stop.
some, and so it's a combination. I think so. My video is good because I'm host and I'm also the one broadcasting the stream. So there's going to be a little glitchiness like that. So
Sure, sure.
it's okay though.
I feel like we're all getting like accustomed to. The nice thing about all this quarantine and lockdown is we're all are the bar for quality has gone down.
Yeah,
We're all doing these podcasts over like kind of not great Zoom connections, but that's what we have.
yeah. No, and honestly, I think yeah, everybody's kind of accepting of it all. It's pretty, which is really
Sure.
nice. Everybody's just being very
Yeah.
accepting, so that's cool.
But nevertheless, I will attempt to not move my hands as much.
It's all right. So actually, you kind of touched on something that I wanted to ask about. Is like, and somebody also had kind of asked in the chat is, if to pull it straight from the chat is you do 5 people's jobs for programming. How do you manage that and the sort of administrative tasks, the actual running of the company?
Yeah, yeah. Well, yeah, it's just a lot of work. I'd say like the first thing that slips for me is the programming, because that's usually when I'm prioritizing my time. I'm always asking what things are the bottlenecking on me. Like I'm in the way from somebody else progressing. I'm the obstacle, and that's how I prioritize my time. And so a lot of times, like these little programming tickets, that's what can slip, and so that's what does. So programming is intended to be like I slip it between my other tasks of the time.
Oh, okay.
But in general, the way that I approach like the company management end of things is having a management and team in place that I can delegate as much as possible to, and give as much autonomy and authority to. And so there's not a lot of like the day to day that absolutely needs my time and attention. There are still some things, but when you start looking at all the 5 major departments of the company and then all the minor departments after that, like if I were in the weeds on all of that, like absolutely not. I wouldn't be able to do that.
Yeah.
So yeah, so you have a great management and team in place, so you can spend that time. And then from just like a personal standpoint, what I've been doing recently, because the challenge is always that there's so many different draws on attention, and so you
Right.
have to be really deliberate on protecting your time or like blocking out time. So I've been doing a better job over the last few years for myself, blocking out like planning time on Mondays and time immediately after meetings where I can document, and any little things I need to do real quick that came up in the meeting, I can just do right then and there. So it's not on my to-do list anymore.
That's
So like
cool.
being very intentional at the time. And I'm very proud of myself for this. I want to talk about it. I've been, for my entire life, I've been wanting to be a morning person, and I have never been a morning person.
Sure.
And finally was able to achieve that about a year ago, and it's been like life-changing to me. So now I'm getting up at like 5 in the morning each morning, and
Wow.
between like 5 and like 9 or so, when like the company starts coming to life and activity starts happening, I get more done in that 4-hour block than, I mean, I probably like an entire week of work that I would do like during the day overall. Oh, thank
Yeah.
you on the.
It's probably I can lower you a little bit on my side if the audio bit.
Cool.
Yeah, that'll probably help a lot.
Thank you for that real time feedback though. That's exactly what we need.
Yeah, I appreciate that a lot. And things will get better as time goes on. So thank you again. That's something that I struggle with as well. having taken on a lot of newer duties over since the beginning of this year, really, I've never really been very good at organization of time. I usually am just kind of told what to do.
Sure.
And so
Yeah. Yeah.
now having to kind of plan and think ahead, I love hearing how other people handle those, because yeah, attention is so important. And being almost selfish with your time. Like, it's super hard sometimes to say no.
Yeah.
And yeah, and I hear that a lot too, is or those early morning hours, just distraction free. Your phone, nobody's calling you, no emails are coming in. You can just sit down and focus. Do you?
And I feel like
do you,
I
oh
feel
no, go
like
ahead.
late night could work as well, but I don't know, something with me, like it's more intentional in the morning. Like I wake up and I say, this is what I'm doing. It's a lot easier for me to start my day that way than to end my day. I'm always like, I don't know, just tired and kind of ramping down, and it's easy to get
Sure.
distracted. And yeah, I feel like, for that intentional time, there's two pieces that are really important. There's planning. And so the thing that's worked well for me is the first 4 hours every Monday. It's like, that's all I'm supposed to be doing right now is planning out my week, and I'm going over meeting notes, and I'm preparing for meetings, and setting like my goals for myself for that week. But then the second piece that's really difficult, and the struggle for probably a lot of us is like, once you have that time blocked off, to be self-disciplined to no, that's what I'm going to do. I don't care
Yeah.
if 5 minutes ahead of that, somebody came to me with something that's on fire, that I need to deal with. Like, I can deal with that after my blocked off time. It doesn't have
Right.
to be right now, because if I don't do that, I just get pulled into the weeds every time.
That's got to be hard, especially when it's an emergency for someone else. And I being at the top of the pyramid, like, I feel like there must be a lot of pressure to help, to, like, if somebody, especially if it's someone directly under you, one of the managers or something, saying, hey, I need this fixed. um like, how do you determine what is an emergency for you?
Yeah.
I suppose, is that
I guess the real honest answer on that is, I think you build a trust with somebody. Like the management team has been great. Like, we have a relationship built where, if one of them says, I need you right now, I know they need me right now.
oh, that's good.
Um, that's not necessarily true of like everyone in the company. There's definitely, 'cause not everyone has that skill, like where, everything I need right now.
Right.
And so, yeah, you just kind of build that trust. It has been challenging. Like 10 years ago, when everything was email, it was a lot easier to structure your response time.
Oh,
But
sure.
now so much has moved to instant messaging, and that's more of a kind of a instant gratification type of platform. And so we have to do a lot of training and reminders internally about, what form to use for what. Is it conversational and immediate? Okay, that's instant messaging. Is it project based and not time sensitive? Okay, that'd be better for email.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's a
I
challenge, and I have to remind myself as well, like, because my default mode, I talked about, like, I like to do all the little things real quick. I love to get in and just help people get things done.
Right.
And what I have learned over 20, it took me 20 years. What I've learned is, that actually can end up being really selfish, because I'll come in and I'm almost like robbing people of the experience and gaining that skill themselves. If I'm
Sure.
always like, the quick route. Um,
Yeah.
and so, providing people not really with the answer or not doing it for them, but teaching them how to do it, even if it takes more time, and like it takes significantly more time, is still the better route. I'm pretty terrible at that, but that's what I'm working on personally, and
I
and that's one way that I can like justify in my mind, like, okay, I don't need to put out that fire right now, because they'll get it, they'll figure it out.
Yeah.
Just give them a few minutes to think about it.
I'm a big fan of that kind of a philosophy too. Is I hesitate often to just give an answer. I don't want to always just solve it. I'd rather show you how, so that, I guess that comes from like my tech support background, is like, I should never have to answer the same question more than once, and so I need to teach you how to solve this problem on your own. And
Yeah.
and plus, and I think I think from either side, whether I'm having the problem or the other person, there's a bit more of a satisfaction there too of like,
Oh yeah.
I did that, I fixed it,
Oh yeah.
ha.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah,
Absolutely. And if without that, like nobody's going to progress either. And so, I've come to realize that like I'm actually standing in people's way when I'm doing things for them.
yeah.
And sometimes like I actually have a lot of fun. I have a lot of fun working on our servers and like fixing our cloud stuff and all of that.
That's
But every
cool.
time I do that, somebody else isn't gaining that experience.
Right. Sure. To swing back to something very earlier, you talked about how we have the Jira set up, and
Mhm.
there's actually a sort of, oh, I'm getting notifications. Bling! What was I saying? There's the opportunity and a structure set in place for internally. We have, I believe Lauren helps you guys out a
Mhm.
lot with the programming. It comes kind of back to a managerial question: is like, how do you make the choice of like who gets to do what?
Oh,
And
sure.
yeah,
I mean, a lot of times um, at least right now, it's fairly easy to make those decisions because it's like who's
hmm,
capable.
okay,
Because right now, I mean, again, like coming off 20 years of code, the default is like, almost all the tickets end up trying to come onto my plate. And so then the question becomes, okay, what can we get off onto someone else's plate? Um, and so that might be based on like past experience that they have, or it might be based on like skills they have. And so like, especially if somebody is learning to code, like we kind of give them more like bite-sized things and kind of
hmm,
build that experience over time. We definitely like, Ryan's a very experienced programmer that he could figure anything out. It could take him hours to figure out something that I just kind of know because I built it.
sure.
It doesn't help that like I built 20 years of code with like no documentation or code commenting. So
Ooh, I was gonna
that's
ask
been
about that.
that's been my other task. Like as I've gone in and I'm not going to go through 20 years of code and like I'm going to document it all. But as I work on projects, I add documentation as I touch things.
Yeah.
So that's been part of our. So again, as a team, we had to come up with a standard of like what our documentation looks like.
Oh, cool. That's interesting. That's something I wouldn't have ever considered. I know that there are certain conventions when it comes to like commenting code and things like that. Um, Yeah, that's
But you just
interesting.
have to decide. I mean, there's a convention doc blocks that are standard across a lot of different like IDEs or languages, but we have to decide like internally what do we care about, what type of information do we want to have
Oh,
in that area.
okay. And has it had that had I suppose had that been a bit of a struggle, or is that still a bit of a pain point? Do you guys come across bits of code that are like, what is even going on here?
Yeah, yeah.
And has
Um,
there been a lot of rewriting? Like, is that
oh
part
yeah.
of the process too? Is like, well,
Well, I mean,
we can do this better than it had
yeah.
been before.
I mean, so I'll tell a little story because I mean, part of the um, one of the impacts of being somebody like I've been programming for 20 years and I learned as I went meant that the further back in time you go looking at my code, the more absolutely terrible it is.
Yeah.
So we have internally, we talk about anything with a blue background in our admin
Right.
interfaces
Yep.
because going way back, the very first code that I did, I'd have like a setup like this, multiple monitors. Here, I'm moving my hands again. Multiple monitors, and it was running must have been Windows 98 at the time. And Windows 98 had a feature called web backgrounds, where like your
Oh,
desktop could be a web page.
yeah, yeah.
And the default color scheme for Windows 98 was this like certain shade of blue. And so I would make our administrative interfaces be that exact same blue so that I could it blurred into the desktop perfectly.
Oh,
Um,
neat.
and so that's why our very, 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 very early interfaces are blue. But basically, I mean, the joke is anytime you get into a blue interface, like the code is just ridiculously bad. And I actually get immense satisfaction with like going into those interfaces and overhauling them to like modern code, modern
Ah,
SQL queries, and I almost without fail can make things like 1,000-fold faster, 10,000-fold faster, just
ooh,
because they
that's
were
gotta
just built so terrible
that's gotta
back
feel
then.
good.
Yeah, no,
So,
it's fun. Like optimization, like this really this entire company, Puget Systems, I've come to learn is almost like one big grand effort in optimization.
oh, sure.
Because here we are, building hardware for creators and engineers and scientists, where the whole thing is like, how can we take your work and make it faster? How can we make it more efficient? And so it's about optimization. And so I just get a lot of satisfaction out of that as well. Anytime I build
Yeah.
a page, like if it takes longer than 5 milliseconds to run, like no, keep optimizing.
Wow. That sounds like a pretty high bar to reach for.
Yeah,
Five milliseconds, because I know
is that right?
from some of the mobile
I might be off with my units actually. It's 0.05 seconds. Is that 5 milliseconds? That might be more. Whatever that is,
I'm
0.05
not quite
seconds.
sure myself, but that's fast.
Hmm.
I know down in the corner of some of the reports and stuff it says like this page was built in seconds.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
I'm always surprised if it's like point 0.1. Like that's a blink of an eye. Literally like boop and it's
yeah,
done.
yeah,
So trying to get that even faster, that's
yeah.
pretty cool. How do you
I spend.
how does that even work then? Like how do you make it faster if you're up to date on the code part, or I suppose
Mo-
it's tied together?
yeah, I mean most of the time.
Because it's not just number of lines, right? You have to take into account that
No.
like it's got to talk to the server, whether the one in the back room or the one out in Google, things like that.
Well, this is where I'm going to hope that there's no real developers on the stream. Hopefully, I'm not putting my foot in my mouth. But for me, it's all about loops. When you have code that executes inside loops, that's when it can get out of hand really quickly.
Sure. Okay.
And so, like, the worst possible example would be if you're like, let's say all of the orders that are in process right now, you do a query on that, and then you want to know, well, what's the total of each one? And so if you like loop through it and say order one, what's the total? Order two, what's the total? Like it just takes forever because you're doing all these SQL queries every time. You're running a
Mm-hmm.
bunch of code calculations, and so you want to do everything in one go. So more and more over time, I viewed like the complexity of my job is more about writing really good SQL statements because in the
Ooh.
database query I can say give me all the orders in process right now and calculate the total. And based on the database backend, that can actually be like a ridiculously complicated looking query, which is a lot of fun to write.
Yeah.
And as long as you have your indexes correct in the database, like most of the time, at least with the size of data that we have, like you can get that to kick out almost instantaneously,
Wow.
and then from there it's easy.
That's cool. The code. Yes, people are saying that's code complexity and algorithms. That's neat, man. So this one's a little less programming and a little more
Sure.
just company talk, but and I kind of know the answer to this one, but it's always better to come from you. Like how I'm going to rephrase this a bit, but
Okay.
because they're asking how many employees start in one position and move to another, but
Hmm.
I'd rather tweak that just a little bit and talk about how easy that is, because again I know considering where I've come from and where I am now, but from the higher level perspective, a little insight into that, into how easy it is for one to move from one thing to another.
Well, I don't know. It depends on what you mean by easy, I guess. I mean, it happens all the time. Yeah, I'd say there's I don't know, maybe half no, maybe not quite half, but there's a good chunk of the company that started somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
The joke used to be on our sales team that we've actually never hired in sales. Everyone was always from somewhere else in the company, and
Sure.
we finally learned how to hire into sales recently and got some great people in.
Yeah.
But no, I mean, it happens pretty frequently. And a lot of that is putting it in the hands of everyone to say, like, where do you want to go? Like, what do you want to do? Are you getting tired of where you are now? Where do you want to grow? Where do you want to learn? And we have those kind of talks pretty frequently in the one-on-one meetings on our like reviews that we do a few times a year. So I mean, you're testament to this. Like you've been around.
Yep.
Now, like as for how easy it is, like there's definitely challenges because a lot of times
Sure.
we'll take it as like, well, we don't know if it's tough for somebody to say in their career, like I know I'm okay where I'm at, but I've always been interested in this thing over here. How can I check that out? And so you
Yeah.
end up with like a foot on each side of the fence for a while as you're like doing the job you can do, but you're trying to check out the job and you're being given opportunities over there.
Mhm.
But then it's really hard to like perform in both positions because you're splitting your time and your energy. So, we do that quite often here or there. Like, we give people a taste, but then at some point you got to just take the leap of faith and just go for it.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say it's really difficult. I mean, you can speak to this. Like, it's really difficult for the person doing it because it's it's like getting totally outside your comfort zone. It's learning a whole new set of skills. But in terms of like, how are there people at Puget Systems that feel stuck where they're at? Well, I'd hope not. And if anybody's watching this and they do, like, speak up then, because you shouldn't have to. There should be those opportunities that you can be given. Yeah. Sometimes with a small business, like, there's just realities. Like, it's been amazing how many people say they want to do network security, and like, okay, a small business of 46 people, we just don't need 5 network security people on staff. Sure. So, when we don't have a need, we don't have a need. But if there's something internally that we can do, for example, like anytime we open a new position up in the company, first thing we do before we even list anything publicly is we list the job internally, and we let people internally apply for that job.
Yeah, which that's which this is the part that I can speak to is I love how flexible and open the suggestions are, because like I kind of was a squeaky wheel and really created the job that I have now, and so that's super cool too. And I feel like a lot of times when people who have come into the company, they're not really used to having that option. And so it's really cool to just put that out there, to let that be open and public, that you're not just stuck with what we hired you to do.
Yeah. No, I remember when you first brought up community manager, and on it, my first reaction, honestly, was like, we need that? That doesn't seem like a full-time thing, but it's cool to see, like, you give people the opportunity, and sometimes honestly it can take a while to like form out what is success in that new role, but it's really cool to see that happen over time.
I've been having a lot of fun with it. It's cool, definitely. Let's see if we got any questions from chat. Miniature Viking says, we're talking about SQL. I love me some SQL. I admit, back in the day, I feel like if I could rewind the clock, I think database administration would have been the thing for me to like really double down on, because it came so naturally to me. Data manipulation and OLAP cubes and things like that was just I mean, that's probably old school now, but data was always fun. Let's see, any spots for assembly? No.
Cameras. I feel like we have some.
Let's see. I guess there was someone was asking about a comparison of SQL to MS Access. Can you speak to that at all?
No. I've used Access, I think, a few times, but honestly, I don't have a lot of experience with it. I mean, I think a lot of SQL is pretty similar. I mean, we've used, we're on MySQL, and we split off into MariaDB a little while, and then kind of went back to SQL. That's because that's what Google offered us when we moved to the cloud. But Microsoft SQL, I'm sure it's all very similar, just like minor differences in syntax. And yeah, it's cool because you really have to think about data structure and like what the best way to structure data is. And sometimes, honestly, it's kind of maddening. Like, you can do the work to categorize all your data, but then when a query doesn't run with performance that you thought it would run at, troubleshooting performance isn't one of my favorite things in SQL.
Oh, okay. That's interesting to hear, especially from kind of coming right on the back of like, optimization, yay.
Well, no, I mean, that's the thing. Like, I'm so like, I want it to run quickly, and when I've tried, every which way, like approaching a different strategy in a query for how to get it to run quickly, and like, no matter what I do, it takes like 2 seconds to run. Drives me mad.
Yeah.
And then eventually I just end up having to find another way to do it.
That's pretty cool. What is your go-to, I mean, other than like Google, of course, but like, where do you turn when you do have troubles like that?
Oh, for optimization?
Yeah. Or just code in general, I suppose.
Yeah. No, honestly, I don't have really much better answer than Google. A lot of times, it's not really a matter of you're looking for like inspiration or a new idea that you hadn't thought of that you could do. So it isn't necessarily like I'm going on Google and I'm copying and pasting code. it's more like, oh, right, yeah, why didn't I think about, doing it as a subquery or something? Um, and so then you just go off and write it yourself.
I see. That's cool. Let's see. What's your favorite? Well, no, I suppose we probably already touched on that a little bit. Your favorite part about programming?
No, I think you and I've talked about it in the past, but I don't know if we have here.
Oh, okay.
Because you talked about like the running joke here at Puget is like Puget systems just exist, so I have a reason to program.
Yeah.
Um, and then that's kind
It's
of
all
not
just one big giant coding project for you. 20 years
right.
running.
That's like there's a glimpse of truth in there. Um, the most enjoyable thing to me is the fact that in my like programmer position, I can impact the lives of so many people and like make their day-to-day experience better, or like take something that was like super frustrating and just like poof, the problem's gone. Like have a
Yeah.
fundamentally better way of doing things. And we've seen a little bit of like, when we use tools that we pay for versus
Mhm.
ones we write ourselves, like it's great because like bam, like we're up and running with some new platform, and there's a whole like army of developers working on this platform. But the downside is like we can't do anything we want anymore, and that's
Mm.
why there's always like some parts of Puget Systems that I'm going to want to be in-house programmed, and that's the ERP at this point,
Sure.
like our purchasing, inventory, quoting tools. Because like even today, like we had a meeting today over some pain points we were having with like how we're getting instructions to shipping, and we're
Oh.
like, let's just change it. We're just going to change how we do that then. And so there's like 5 different programming tickets that are coming in. We're going to execute those over the next 2 weeks, and like problem solved. And I
Boom.
love that. And it's really cool to have this like platform that we can do anything we want. Yeah, we have to put in the time to do anything we want, but we can do that. And anyway, I get a lot of satisfaction out of helping people in that way. And it would
Yeah.
be like, I can go home and I can program stuff for myself, but that's no fun. It's just building it for yourself. Like I love
Right.
going and helping other people. Like it's to me, I guess maybe that's what it is. Like it's not actually even about the code. It's about what it's doing for people.
Sure. Solving problems. That's been the
I mean,
biggest.
it's the whole
That's
mantra of the company, right?
Yeah. Right. That's cool. Ah, that's neat to kind of see it come to fruition from a different angle like that.
Well, I mean, that's the beauty of like a company, because that's one thing I really appreciate about Puget is like we're not trying to be something. Like we're just people who are passionate about like the mission that we're on, and we're doing it. And the reason why you see that theme like threaded through the company, whether it's internal facing or public facing, is because it's not a show. It really is like that's just who we are.
Yeah.
And so whether it's approaching like the employee experience or how we program things or the computers that we build, like it's all kind of the same mindset.
I like it. That's so cool. It just gives you the warm fuzzies a little bit,
Yeah.
So, this one's from chat. Miniature Viking. What are your thoughts of in-house database management versus cloud-based, such as AWS? And I think we actually did move a lot of our
Yeah.
database from an internal to now a cloud-based system, right?
Well, and just like as I'm talking miniature Viking, maybe clarify like what do you mean by in-house database management? Do you mean like running on premises the database versus running it in the cloud? Um, I'll answer it as if that's the question. Hopefully that is.
Sure.
But yeah, so we ran on-prem everything, database, web, the whole thing for the longest time. And there was actually an incident that caused us to go to cloud, and it was a denial of service attack on our building. Lasted about a week.
The
Boy, I could tell.
Serbians.
Yeah, I could tell a whole story about that. The
I remember
perpetrator
this.
emailed me and basically said, pay me bitcoins and I'll stop my attack. And he kind of got to see the stubborn side of me. I said, I'll run this company to the ground before I pay you anything.
I'm sorry. I just remember
Anyway,
when this was happening. It was pretty hilarious. Internally, it was a lot of fun. I mean,
so
the reaction was fun. Having to deal with it was
sure.
kind of silly.
No, it was a little stressful, but yeah. So that's when we moved to the cloud, and there was a whole bunch of other reasons. Like it's great that we don't have to administer our own server room anymore. I don't have to worry about like what if power goes down here. We don't have to worry about internet connection. Ironically, after like all this moved to the cloud, like now we have a rock solid gigabit fiber line. We have full generator backups. Like we actually are pretty well set up to come back to a local hosted on everything here. But the beauty of the cloud is like it's just not my problem. The database backups just happen. If whatever some web server node has a problem, then they take care of it, and we do everything on Google. So it's Google SQL, it's Google just virtual machines running the LAMP stack. So Linux, Apache, MySQL, PHP. So yeah, I think there's a time and place for everything. There's definitely we still run some on-prem stuff because a lot of the tools that we use like on the warehouse floor for like taking photographs or thermal images or scale weights or a lot of things like those have to interact with our public server. And so we actually have still like a little miniature web server here locally where basically all it does is take data from inside the building, and it's basically an API that then feeds that into the cloud server. So we still do both.
Nice. Another question from chat from somebody named Matthew Bach. No. Yes, it's Batmock. How do you decide whether you should program something from scratch versus using a paid tool or program? That's a good question because I know that
is a really good question.
We've come up against.
Well, I think historically the way that I would answer that question would be, am I happy with the tools that are out there, or like what are the cost of the tools out there, or can they actually get the job done? And that's still sometimes the answer. If there's something that doesn't exist out there, then all right, we'll build it ourselves. And it's really disappointing how often that's actually the answer, that there's not a good tool out there for some problem. But what we've decided as a dev team more recently was what is our core product. And we do that because if it's not our core product, then we are going to, even if it's a subpar solution that we have to go out there to buy, that's still what we're going to do because it's protecting our time and energy for the core product. And again, that core product is the ERP. So for example, a CRM for our sales team, contact relationship management, right? So all of the interactions we have with customers, whether it's on the sales side or support side, we could totally build that in-house. In fact, I had it probably 80% built in our support system. And so we totally could have spent more time on that, but there's, 3 months of work that we're not spending on this other product. And so we can either choose to like inch forward on a bunch of things or like do something really well. And so protect our time. So that's why finally, like in the last year, there was an inside joke where we have something called dynamic checkoff. So that's, the process by which we build our computers is like this like crazy complicated logic engine where it says, if this plus this plus this, then do this. So it's just this big if then else statement. Oof. And so we can say like, if it's this customer and it's this computer and they're shipping it to their Michigan address, then do this action. That's what our whole dynamic checkoff is. And it took me a long time to build that, years actually. And the only reason why it finally got done was because we protected our time and we said, no, everything else we're going to buy so that we can build that.
Neat.
And things like that.
Yeah, I see. Which, by the way, dynamic checkoff, super fresh. It is probably kind of tying back to that facet of like efficiency and optimization. I think that when that has revolutionized the assembly process, there's so much less you have to actually think about, and way to go to everybody involved in that. Big high fives for sure.
It's been an interesting like maturation process for us as a company as we've had that, because like I feel like we're only now coming out of like the first era of what dynamic checkoff means, because I don't know if I'm gonna ramble about this, I feel like, but when you first have a tool like that, your first instinct, which is correct, is to like put everything in the tool. Like we want to make building computers like a McDonald's job. Like anybody can build a computer because it just do exactly what the checkoff tells you. And that's right from a documentation standpoint and everything. But what it means is that you don't end up being as intentional with teaching people like the critical like thinking skills, or like no, that's not even the right way to say it. Teaching people why we do things the way we do. Like if it just says like turn this screw a quarter turn, well, why are we doing that? So we're learning as an organization that as we beef up our documentation and processes, that we were missing something. And so now we're going back, and our second wave is, okay, make sure everyone understands why we're doing it the way that we do, so that we don't turn into just like a thoughtless process, but it's a thoughtful process. So we learned that was like a mistake we went down, and we're correcting that now.
Nice. Yeah. So there's another question from the chat from Edawall97. Are you using any kind of framework like Laravel or design patterns, MVC, for programming?
Yeah. No, not really. I mean, yeah, MVC as a concept. We're using Smarty for some of our projects more recently, but we don't have something we're like standardized on like company wide.
Okay.
Um,
So just for my own sake, what is he referring to with MVC?
Model view controller. So
Okay.
when you build out your code, you say like, okay, there's three things you want to do. You want to like build in your logic for what kind of actions is your code performing. And I guess that's the controller. Model would be, I guess, more getting like the data. I'm butchering this, I'm sure. More getting you like your data back in your data structures, and then view is like just output. What do you want this to look like? Where are you going to put the different fields? And so I
Oh,
think a little
like
more like
how
entry.
like how HTML, CSS, and JavaScript kind of work together.
Um, I guess. I mean, yeah, it's almost similar concept.
Okay.
Like when you're dealing like with PHP specifically, like it's really easy to just like do everything in like one big spaghetti mess of like I'm gonna do a query and then I'm gonna output something and then there's gonna be an if statement. And so the MVC design lets you be a little bit more, I guess, like deliberate and organized and say like, okay, all of my logic is going to be here, all of my data conditioning is going to be here, and then all of my output is going to be here. So
Oh,
if you want
okay.
to like just change, like, okay, I want to move this field over here, it's a lot more clear where things are going, and frankly, like it's good for even just security. You don't have just like variables flying around all over the place, and that's how you get things like SQL injection uh,
Right. Like
vulnerabilities.
there's that XKCD comic about Johnny Tables who
Yeah,
deletes the
little Johnny
entire school
tables.
record.
Yeah.
I like that one.
Yeah,
That's what you get for not sanitizing your database entries, right?
exactly. Exactly. Which,
Okay, so
go to
that's
those any of those blue interfaces, and I'm sure there's plenty of vulnerabilities like that. Honestly, that's another thing that like internally, well, I don't know. I get a lot of satisfaction too over just learning by doing it the wrong way. That's the wrong way of saying it. Continually learning. Like I get a lot of satisfaction out of going out of code I wrote even a few years ago and realizing like, oh, with what I know now, like, why did I do that? Let's overhaul this thing and rebuild it.
oh, that's cute. Just somebody in chat was saying that John's the head guy in charge in a more robust way.
There's a lot
Let's
going on in
see.
chat. It's hard to keep up with everything.
Yeah, yeah. Let's see. I think that hits the questions from chat, and and we're about 5 minutes shy of the ending. So, is
Oh wow.
there any other insights into that part of your work that you'd like to give?
Into the programming specifically,
Yeah.
I don't know. It's been fun for me in this last year to I said this earlier, but I'll just underline it. It's been a big learning experience for me in the last year in going from being a dev to being on a dev team for
Hmm.
the first time, like in my life, programming alongside other people, and I wasn't prepared. I don't think up front for how much um, change that would be. Like you think, okay, well, it's just more people. Like, well, we'll just get more things out. But actually, the amount of like documentation and structure and intentionality and planning that has to go into that, like at first, seemed really like a drag. Like, can't I just? Why do I have to document? Can I just get to work?
Oh, sure.
But now that we have that, and I realize, we're only maybe 30% of the way there. Like we're only just our first year in being a dev team. But now that we have that, it's actually really cool to see, even though it might not be fun, or you want to just get to work. You don't want to like make
Yeah.
your first day be like documentation. But once you put in that time and investment, everything just goes better. You're not like thinking about things on the fly while you're writing them. You actually have like a planning process, and then you have documentation at the end. So the next time you have to go in there, it's um, a better experience to do that. So it builds momentum over time. And I wouldn't say that it was very much fun in the beginning, but like as time goes on, I'm appreciating it more and more. And basically, I mean, I feel like I'm like bringing back lessons from programming back into life overall. That Sometimes it's better to sit and think and plan than to just get started
Sure.
before you
Sure.
do that time.
Huh. That's that's interesting. Not to give too much of a like in the weeds peek, but it's interesting to hear that considering the mission for the year.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Yeah.
And
Well,
so
that's a good point. So, the mission, just for everyone out there, well, maybe it was our motto for the year,
yeah, that's right. That's
was
right.
decide and start. So that's our motto for the year inside Puget Systems: decide and start. And sometimes the company needs a contextual, like, that's not going to be the motto next year. Probably that's the motto for this year.
Right.
And part of the reason why we had a whole big shift in the management team. There was a lot of new, like, marketing department was new, like a lot of new things. And we, as a company, we took disc profiles, so like personality profiles. And it turns out, probably no surprise, like a company full of computer nerds are like all very like analytical, weighing the pros and cons type of personalities. And so as a company, we're very good about talking in circles and like coming up with 16 different ways that we can do something. So to get us moving, what we needed for this year was the encouragement to, like, no, just decide and go. That doesn't mean don't plan.
Right.
But that does mean that, like, don't always, like, you need to go move beyond the planning phase at some point. And so, maybe when it comes to like your weekly thing, it's 4 hours on Monday. And once those 4 hours are up, no, now you're starting. That
Right.
Your planning time's over.
That's cool. I've decided to plan, and I'm going to start that soon. No, that's cool. That's cool. Well, I suppose we'll take this one last question, but I'm not sure. Is John developing programs or internal apps for workflow? I'm not quite sure what they're asking.
Most of the development that I work is for our internal workflow. So when we are
Ah,
building computers, when we're buying components. Now, I guess that's probably a good teaser too. To maybe you should have Matt on for dev stuff. So Matt's doing a lot of work on our customers' workflow, and that comes out like what we're working on right now is benchmarking. Because again, okay, this came up earlier. When do you build versus when do you just buy something? What if it doesn't exist? So as
hey,
we're supporting content creators, engineers, and scientists. What we're finding is that the community out there is dramatically underserved. There is not a lot of tools out there for benchmarking, and we said, all right, fine, we'll build it. And so that's what Matt's doing. He's building benchmarking for like the Adobe suite, for DaVinci Resolve, for these other programs. And we're excited to give that out to the community so that you all don't have to like reinvent the wheel every time. And we can
yeah,
actually, what we're trying to do is make an industry standard around benchmarking for content creation. It's going to take a while, but there's a big vacuum there. There's not a lot of people doing it. So I think we'll be okay.
yeah, that's gonna be cool. I can totally see in a few years where it'll be household name style. Like, you don't use Puget Bench? I don't. Your numbers don't matter. Well, in
We
a
can hope.
similar
That's the
way,
hope.
yeah. I mean, there's those go-to programs for like gaming benchmarks, but even then, they're somewhat synthetic. They don't necessarily read your actual experience, and so yeah, that's kind of exciting to hear that maybe everybody one day you'll see that in all the reviews, like the same way you do Geekbench or something else.
Yeah.
That's
Well, we
super
can plug
cool.
it. Go to pugetsystems.com/benchmark, or is it benchmarks? I don't know if it's benchmarks or
Maybe
benchmark.
both.
It must be benchmarks. But you can download for all those different applications, and once you upload your results, what you're doing us a favor, because when you run that benchmark, at the end you can upload your results back to our server, and it's not about like gathering your personal information, but it is about gathering performance on the hardware that you're running. And we're building up this massive database, and really we're all helping each other, because once this database hits a critical mass, we have thousands of entries in there now, but we want millions of entries in there. We can start giving you some pretty cool statistics, where we can show you like histograms of scores, and you can see for other people that run your identical hardware, you're actually running a little slower than we would expect. And why is that? Oh, maybe you're running the wrong driver version. Like, that's the kind of stuff we want to do. And right now we just need data in order to
Yeah,
fuel that. So run the
yeah,
benchmarks, submit it.
yeah. Do that on all kinds of crazy stuff too. Like
Yeah, yeah.
whatever you can get it to work on, it's helping everybody in the future.
Hmm.
So yeah. Well, right on. We're right here at the end, so thanks. We're gonna say goodbye, and thanks. Thank you again, John, for taking time out of the day to kind of
Oh,
talk
sure.
about and give us a little peek behind one of the many hats that you wear here at Puget Systems. And thank you as well, the audience from wherever it is you might be watching, Facebook, Twitter, Twitch, and YouTube. Thank you guys, everybody, for joining and chatting and asking questions. And we do this Wednesdays is Workflow Wednesdays, where we talk with industry experts and kind of get an insight into their workflow and what they do and how they do it and why. And then on Fridays we have an open office hour with members of our labs team, so you guys can pick their brains about what they know the best. So
Yeah. Do we know who's going to be on this Friday?
This Friday is going to be Matt and William. They're going to be talking about the
Sweet.
new Intel CPUs.
Oh, there's a lot to talk about with new Intel CPUs. Yeah.
Yeah, every time.
Yeah.
So tune in for that. It's Wednesdays and Fridays at 1 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. So go ahead and set a reminder for yourself. And yeah, I think that's it and that's all. So we'll see you guys on Friday.